Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dram Diaries. The reason for today's video was a comment from @BrianBach7395. Brian says, as a casual bourbon drinker who usually drinks it in the form of an old-fashioned, I'm wondering, why would I want more than one or two? And that's a good question, right? Why do I want more than a couple of bourbons? I know for myself, when I first started drinking whiskey, I typically had maybe 4 or 5. A couple other friends I have that are very into whiskey, when they started, same thing. But kind of what happens is you start getting curious and you want to try other flavor profiles, other experiences. And then it gets fun. We start doing blind tastings, just kind of a fun, like, social thing to do, and it becomes a hobby, you know. I mean, do you need all of this whiskey? You don't, but it's enjoyable. It's fun, and once you start tasting those different flavor profiles from different distilleries, different proofs, you are going to have just a large library that you can choose from, and you may be wanting a certain flavor or proof one day, well, and you have it. And it's fun to kind of share with other people. But if you're just like a casual drinker, nothing wrong with that, and you typically will mix it in an old-fashioned, I don't see anything wrong with just having a couple of bourbons. Brian goes on to say, is one brand better for mixing and others for straight? My opinion is I wouldn't look at it necessarily as a brand. One brand or one distillery will say better than another. I would say, is there a distillery profile that you like? You know, if you like more of a nutty, caramely profile, I'm thinking Heaven Hill or something from Jim Beam is probably going to be more up your alley. If you like kind of like more of, I would say, vanilla and cinnamon and maybe some fruit, Wild Turkey or Four Roses might be more up your alley. If you like something just generally just sweeter, you could go with the wheated bourbon, like a Maker's Mark product, or even something from Jack Daniel's distillery, you know. So that depends on the flavor profile that you like. Typically, I'm going to say if people are mixing, they're not going to use a higher priced bourbon. They're going to use something a little bit lower priced. And I'm going to give you an example. One, when we do mix, that we love is Wild Turkey 101. And I think, you know, that around 100 proof is a good point for mixing because it will stand up to being mixed in with other ingredients, and you're still going to get that good flavor from the bourbon. But I go ahead and buy it in a handle because it works out to about $20 for this bottle instead of $27 if you were to buy a handle of Wild Turkey 101. Another product from Wild Turkey that I love to sip on is this right here, Russell's Reserve Single Barrel, 110 proof. This is about 65 bucks for us. I'm not going to mix with this because, one, the price, and two, it's so good on its own. Don't get me wrong, Wild Turkey 101 on its own, very good. Like, I will sip this on its own. I really like this profile, but just for the price, it's amazing for mixing. I know Evan Williams is another white label popular bourbon for mixing. For me, this is a far better product than Evan Williams white label. That one it's good, it's sweet, but it's kind of harsh and youthful. This doesn't have any of those, I'm going to say, off-putting notes, but hopefully that kind of answers that question. Brian goes on to say, are some better for different drinks? Thanks for any help. Well, thank you for turning to us for help. We know what we're talking about. No. Yeah, I would say, again, for example, on Manhattan, when I am going to make a Manhattan, I'm thinking a rye. Like, sometimes I'll use a bourbon, but like for me, Manhattan typically made with a rye. You can make it with a bourbon if you want. It doesn't matter if that's what you like the taste of. Or An old-fashioned. You brought up you usually drink in the form of an old-fashioned. I know most old-fashions are typically made with bourbon, but again, if you want to try putting a rye into an old-fashioned, go for it. Something I will say that we do differently when we make an old-fashioned, instead of like a sugar cube or simple syrup, what I like to do is when I buy a bourbon that I don't really like that much, I will turn it into a bourbon syrup. And it's pretty simple for me. I mean, I just, put in a cup or two of brown sugar, depends how much bourbon I have. Pour that brown sugar and the bourbon in and start simmering it until it gets to the consistency I like. And if I want more bourbon, I'll put more of that bourbon in it. And I'll use that instead of the simple syrup. It really, really amps the flavor for me in an old-fashioned. I really like that. Speaking of old-fashions, there's a channel, Old Fashioned Ways, with 2 plus signs. I'll put a link to a video in the end of this video. So he makes old fashions with various kinds of whiskeys, and pretty entertaining, pretty informative. So I recommend checking that out if you like to drink your whiskeys in the form of an old fashioned. So at Brian Bach, what was it? 7395. Thank you for those questions, and keep them coming. We'll do our best to give you our opinion. It's just our opinion. It's not right or wrong. It's just another opinion. But again, thank you for tuning in. And if you like this kind of content, go ahead and give us some questions that we will try and answer for you. So thank you. Please consider subscribing, like the video. It really helps us out. Until next time.